Okay, hi friends, and now we're moving towards the end of this book. As I told you earlier, I was going to skip over that lengthy section on the new esoteric schools, on which I have written a detailed comedy. Comedy, did I say? Commentary, maybe it's a comedy. Anyway, I'll come back to it, because it may be that the video is of use to you. But this, I certainly think that the written commentary can be of use to you. That is my impression. So we have finished then program 62, and we're beginning, 63. 63. And today is the 7th of February, 2021. And we're dealing now with the final effect of all that has been presented to us, the resultant act, or the resultant life of service. It's come right down to the physical plane and everything we can do on that physical plane to make our service a reality. We look here then at the motives for service, the methods of service, and the attitude following action. All of these have to be important. And I talked to a friend once. He's doing really great work, and I said to him, well, I was telling him I was working on Letters on Occult Meditation. He says, oh yeah, that's the very first book I read. And but he hadn't read it since. And was it one of the first books that I read of the Tibetan? I think I got right into the psychology part because I was interested in the rays, but it was a book that I read early. And at this point, begin to have my regrets that I let so long an hiatus intervene between that first reading long ago and this moment. I do remember, was it, I think it was called Olcott, the Theosophical Headquarters in Wheaton, Illinois, something like that. Olcott. And I don't know if I went in there intending to be struck by the Bailey books, maybe, but I had to reach pretty high to find them. They were way up there on the shelves. It's like they kind of fell off and started a whole new life for me. I wasn't quite 30 yet. And some of my friends in the work started even much earlier, in their teens. They recognized the value, the immense value of the book. So motives for service, methods of service, and attitudes following action. And you know that under the law of service, in Esoteric Psychology, Volume 2, there's an elaboration of all of this. It's as if this book, Letters on Occult Meditation, is kind of a seed book, and that he's been able to expand on that seed in the other books. The Resultant Life of Service. Okay. Goodness. September 16th, 1920. I guess one might want to go all the way back and find out when that first letter was written, which I'm, kind of going to do here right now. This, it says, received by Alice Bailey. That's the very beginning. And between May 16th and October 20th, except for 2 letters received in 1919. I think she met the Tibetan in this incarnation as a presence on November 19th, 1919. Anyway, for all of these 350 pages to be dictated, or most of them between May 16th and October, and here we have this last letter seemingly showing September 20. September 23rd, 26th. She was busy, and he was intent to bring this material forward. We take up today another of the series of letters on occult meditation. Whoop, I better be careful here because otherwise I'm going to start working on the... here it is. Here it is. September 16th. Now I wonder if they're out of order somehow. Looks like the Tibetan was dictating on the new schools after he gave this. At least this says September 16th, and the material on the new esoteric schools is September 26th. I seek to give you today, in closing this series, something of general use. I wish to speak to you anent service and its perfect rendering. What I give you in this connection may be of vital use. Remember always that material gained in knowledge for the individual causes stagnation, obstruction, indigestion, and pain. If not based on the wise, if not passed on with wise discrimination. And then he's going to give an analogy which will help us understand why. Food absorbed by the human body, if not assimilated and passed through the system, causes just such just the above conditions: stagnation, obstruction, indigestion, and pain. Of course, one has to, and so many of us have the responsibility of passing the knowledge on to others, at least alerting them that it exists and that a treasure house of knowledge leading to transformation exists. So the analogy is correct. Much tuition comes to many these days, but it is for the use of a needy world and not for their own exclusive benefit. Maybe that's something, it is something that he's called attention to a few times. He says if there's that somehow prideful reaction in receiving this before most others receive this material, it's not the right reaction. And it really indicates that it cannot do what it was intended to do. So we can question ourselves as to why we want to know. The will to know, but the will to serve must accompany the will to know. The rendering of service, in rendering service, three things are of moment. Motive, the method, and the attitude, following action. Right away we can, why are we doing it? Are we doing it wisely? And what do we think about self and others following whatever action we take? With wrong motives I deal, and methods I deal not. To you they are known. I indicate the right, and by adjustment of the life of service to my indications comes correction and inspiration. I deal with the right. Because no doubt we do need to be instructed on these matters. And there is much to correct in our attitude towards what is service really, and how to be inspired to carry forward our service so that we can serve more effectively, more often, and in a better way. A life, he says, of much service opens up to many these days. See, all of you, that it commences right. A right beginning is liable to eventuate in continuous correctness and helps much in the endeavor. Where failure follows in such a case, all that is needed is readjustment. In failure, where the beginning has been at fault, and inevitable failure, I suppose, if the beginning is incorrect, the need is for the renewal of the inner springs of action. So see you, all of you, that the commencement is correct. The beginning is half of everything. Let us see to it that we begin correctly, and we always are beginning, because there are always new service initiatives. So, get started correctly. These seem such simple indications, but I guess they are violated quite frequently. I told you the story that I once taught a class where I was a little bit chastised for using something so simple initially as the rules of the road found in the Dina books, but within a short time, almost everybody had broken those rules. So, a right beginning is the key, and then, of course, he'll give us more in that wonderful chapter on service in, well, it's all through his books, but in Dina, in esoteric psychology too. Now, the motive for service, the motives for service, he'll give that to us correctly. And these are threefold and in order of their importance. Point A, a realization of God's plan of evolution, a sensing of the world's dire need, an apprehension of the immediate point of world attainment, and a consequent throwing of the total of one's resources into the furtherance of that end. So it's the pretty obviously here, whoop, that's not what I want, but it can serve a purpose. The big, whoop, the big picture. A realization of God's plan. The plan is often considered the most important starting point of evolution here. A sensing, and we can sense it better now than ever before because of the communications network that has evolved through the internet, a sensing of the world's dire need. You are there. You are in the disadvantaged areas of the world. Up close, you know exactly what's going on. An apprehension of the immediate point of world attainment, so that, this is not minimized or exaggerated, and a consequent throwing of the total of one's resources into the furtherance of that end. I guess we can question ourselves on every point. And when it comes to that last point, a consequent throwing of the total of one's resources into the furtherance of meeting that need. That's demanding. Okay, well, that's the most important. And then a definite personal goal of achievement, some great ideal, such as holiness of character that calls forth the soul's best endeavor, or a realization of the reality of the masters of the wisdom, or a strong inner determination to love, serve, and reach them, the masters, at all costs. when you have this intellectual grip of God's plan coupled with a strong desire to serve the great ones, in physical plane activities will come the working out. So this one, a definite goal of personal achievement. That's an important foundation, however it may manifest. And here I'll kind of start it off with red. And then the third, a realization next of one's innate or acquired capacities and a fitting of those capacities to the need appreciated. No sense barking up the wrong tree, no sense attempting some kind of work without the tools to make that work successful. Service is of many kinds, and he who wisely renders it, who seeks to find his particular sphere. It's going to be a small sphere at first, but still useful to others, and who finding it gives effort gladly for the benefit of the whole, is the man whose own development proceeds steadily. But nevertheless, the aim of personal progress remains secondary. So primarily, it's to help the world in dire need. So that's about the motives for service, the positive motives. And now we have the methods of service, which are diverse. And of course, the problem is so often we try to adjust another person's methods, which inevitably is an approach that doesn't work. We have to leave people free according to their own understanding. They are, says the Tibetan, these methods, many and varied. I can but indicate the ones of paramount importance. Well, first of all, there comes the faculty of discrimination. There's only so much energy available to any of us in an incarnation, and we cannot waste our energy. He who considers that he can attempt all things, or engages in all lines of thought, who balks not at aught that happens his way, he doesn't respond to what he encounters as he attempts to enter his service, or who rushes wildly, it sounds like a lot of third ray here, who rushes wildly in where wiser ones refrain, who considers he has the capacity for that which arises, who brings zeal but no brains. It's a little humorous. Who brings zeal but no brains to bear on this problem of service, such a one but dissipates force. He renders oft destructive action. He wastes the time of wiser and greater ones in the correcting of his well-meant mistakes, and he serves no end but his own desires. The reward of good intention may be his, but it is frequently offset by foolish action. Well, we can say that desire drives this unwise approach. Zeal but no brains. I like that. Maybe we've all had instances of that kind of approach in our life. And meaning no disrespect, but there's even a story about Master DK being so zealous that he kind of ran into something, a doorway, and kind of bruised himself in his zeal. Maybe he has experience there. I know I do. When I look back and look how excited I may have been about some particular method of doing something valuable, but it was inappropriate and energy was wasted. And maybe correction had to come of those who were more experienced. But he serves no end but his own desires. So discrimination is just a key factor here. And I'm going to the faculty of discrimination. And here maybe I can make this a little more outstanding. We'll pause for just a moment. Have you been discriminative in the service you seek to render? Are you fit to offer that particular kind of service? Who are you serving? Your own desires? Or are you serving in an adequate manner those who need to be served? Because you are suited to serve them. You've appraised your abilities, your capacities. Yeah, well, we have to self-evaluate, right? But now, quite the opposite of the one who rushes from point to point, hither and thither, and presumes he can undertake all things, and does not adjust his behavior according to the feedback he gets from his environment. In other words, he just doesn't learn, right? There's another approach. He serves with discrimination. Who realizes wisely his own niche, great or small, in the general scheme, who calculates soberly his mental and intellectual capacity, his emotional caliber, and his physical assets, or I suppose liabilities, and then with the sum of the whole, applies himself to fill the niche. Well, it seems so obvious, but so many times we find people barking up the wrong tree, and we have to make sure that even though we might, like to fulfill a place in service higher than our own capabilities, it's simply our desire that's at work here. Because if we attempt such a thing, those who might be served at a slightly more modest level just are not served. There are, let's say, people who might be perfectly good at some particular task, but they, want to be the leader, they want to be the president, they want to be something great, so the egotistical motive is involved. And they end up serving only themselves. And so here a list of how to serve with discrimination. And basically, firstly, find your proper niche. I remember wanting to be an opera singer. It wouldn't have. It was more like from a previous life and how hard I tried, but it wasn't my niche. Or a stage director, that was more so. And I learned some things, but it really wasn't the niche. And finally, with education, and specifically education in the science of spiritual occultism, I think I found it. And you can look around you at what you are fulfilling and what it might develop into. You'll find your niche. Okay, the next way, right? He serves with discrimination, who judges with the aid of his higher self and the master what is the nature of and the measure of the problem to be solved. Okay. So more than his own understanding is involved here. and is not guided by the well-meant, though often ill-judged suggestions, requests, and demands of his fellow servers. From whom do we take advice? So, secondly, we take advice from the higher self and from the master, and not from those who do not know or understand the problem. So we may have to reject the importuning of those who would like to see a problem solved in a certain way and rapidly and by certain means, but we know there are better and wiser ways to solve the problem. And higher self offer better and wiser ways to solve the problem. Now, also, another way yet of serving with discrimination. He serves with discrimination who brings a realization of time into action and comprehending that each day contains but 24 hours and that his capacity contains but the expenditure of just so much force and no more, wisely adjusts his capacity and the time available to each other. So the time factor enters in, and this is a recognition, we might say, of temporal. I'd like to, don't know why this is peculiar. Temporal limitations. So, if we don't have that sense of our own limitations wisely assessed, we will overextend, and we will somehow measure ourselves against the entire need, and our just assessment of our capacities and limitations will be overlooked. And the result is the instrument of service will decline in usefulness, and as the Tibetan says, we will shorten the term of service, which is not, of course, what we want to do. Each day contains but 24 hours, and that his capacity contains but the expenditure of just so much force and no more. He wisely adjusts his capacity and the time available to each other. Well, you've got to say, don't you? that these methods of serving with discrimination have much common sense. So we know our niche. We consult our own higher self and the master regarding the nature of the problem to be solved, and we observe the temporal limitations. And there's still more in how to observe the best methods or undertake the best methods of service. Oop. I have to be so careful there, otherwise I alter the entire format. Next follows a wise control of the physical vehicle. And I'm sure we've all gone through passages when we have not wisely controlled the physical vehicle. A good server causes the master no anxiety from physical causes, and may be trusted so to guard and husband his physical strength that he is always available for the carrying out of the master's requests. He does not fail from physical disability. He sees that his lower vehicle gets sufficient rest and adequate sleep. He rises early and retires at a seemly hour. He relaxes whenever possible. He eats wholesome and suitable food and refrains from heavy eating. A little food, well chosen and well masticated, is far better than a heavy meal. Then comes this statement that a number of my associates have paid particular attention to without necessarily being able to do anything about it. The human race eats these days, as a rule, 4 times as much as required. I mean, you kind of wonder why it's not 3 times or 5 times or 2 times. DK is assessing carefully. He ceases from work when, through accident or the recurrence of inherited physical disability, his body reacts against action and cries out for attention. He then seeks rest, sleep, dietary precautions, and necessary medical attention. He obeys all wise instruction, giving time for his recovery. Well, it's simply a judicious approach, is it not? And, not pushed to extremes. Because if the physical vehicle is not ready to be of use, and something the master needs done, well, the service is obviously curtailed. And even though the physical vehicle is not a principle in the occult sense, it is a necessity. Sufficient rest, adequate sleep, early rising, I guess it has more to do with the energy available, and retires at a seemly hour. So in the new schools, we know the hours of sleep are taken from 10 in the evening to 5 in the morning. Maybe that's what he means, something like that. He's not always in a state of tenseness, which wastes energy. He refrains from heavy eating, doesn't eat too much, and makes sure that, just imagine DK is really telling us what to do in a very concrete way. Chew well. Don't wolf it down, you know? And here's the master paying attention to these ordinary physical details. So we're taking care of the three vehicles, basically. And we're learning how to avoid their misuse, because they won't be of value to us if we misuse them. And obviously, our service will be curtailed or shortened, or its quality reduced. Now we go on to the care of the emotional body, and that's the next step. The steady care and control of the emotional body. This is the most difficult vehicle to tend, as is well known. The issue is it is the strongest at this point of evolution in our planetary logos and in our solar logos. It is an undivided vehicle. And we just check the charts in a treatise on cosmic fire and we'll see what division means. Higher mind from lower mind, etheric from physical. But when it comes to the emotional body, there is continuity. So no excessive emotion is permitted, though strong currents of love for all that breathe are allowed to sweep through. Love being the law of the system, this second major solar system of love, is constructive and stabilizing and carries all on in line with the law. No fear or worry or care can shake the emotional body of the aspiring servant of all, and think of that word shake. He cultivates serenity, stability, and a sense of secure dependence on God's law, you know, a real belief in the invariability of God's law, a conviction concerning it. A joyous confidence characterizes his habitual nature. He harbors no jealousy, no cloudy gray depression, and no greed or self-pity. You know, again, go to a treatise on white magic, page 473, and you will see what we must cast out and what we must retain, realizing that all men are brothers and that all that exists, and that all that is exists for all. He proceeds calmly on his way. This is a beautiful way of describing what is needed in the care of the emotional body. If this could be achieved by so many of us, our path would be far clearer, far less obstructed. We do get in our own way through our emotional states. This is very inspiring to me, and I hope it is to you too. It is difficult. No excessive emotion is permitted, but strong currents of love are allowed to sweep through. Again, it sounds like we need to cultivate that second ray emotional vehicle. The rays do change, over time. Casting out all fear, all worry, all care in the great confidence we have in the abiding law. Serenity is the way. And the Christ has set the example with his calmness forever unperturbed. A joyous confidence characterizes his habitual attitude. A joyous confidence. Gosh, I can see a good reason to return to a reading of this frequently. Because these are troubled times. And what appears on the outside can look dire, and is in a way, but is different from what is taking form on the inside. No jealousy. After all, we are all of us the same being. Can one be jealous of oneself? No cloudy gray depression, Leadbeater's drawings, or at least his advice to the artists who drew them, show what the aura can look like under a cloudy gray depression. Not very pretty. No greed or self-pity. Self-pity, a glamour-inducing condition on the second ray. But realizing that all men are brothers. A Venusian realization coming for so many at the end of the age of Aquarius, and that all that exists is for all. The need for sharing, because the one being which humanity is consists of that apparently differentiated number of units, and yet they are one. And then something that has to be developed, he proceeds calmly on his way. And then the mental vehicle. Okay. Let's, what I'm trying to do here is, just note where the important sections begin. Then ensues the development of his mental vehicle. In the control of the emotional body, the server takes the attitude of illumination. His aim is so to train the emotional body that it becomes devoid of color, has a still vibration, and is clear and white, limpid as a pool on a still summer day. The analogy helps, doesn't it? Okay, so this analogy helps us. So that's what we want from the That's what we want from the emotional body. But something different is coming up when we consider the mental body, or the, as Alice Bailey has often said, the well-stocked mind. No, that's not the color I want there. This will be more the rose color. But in the fitting of the mental body for service, the worker strives at the opposite of illumination, elimination. He seeks to build in information, to supply knowledge and facts, to train it intellectually and scientifically so that it may prove, as time goes on, a stable foundation for the divine wisdom. Wisdom supersedes knowledge, a stable foundation. So this is building in the knowledge rather than eliminating the glamours that afflict the astral body, the obstructions, the storms, the waves that rise upon the stormy seas of life, engulf the swimmer, shut out the sun, and render all plans futile. Part of those 15 counsels, beginning on page 473 of esoteric, a treatise on white magic. Wisdom supersedes knowledge, yet requires knowledge as a preliminary step. Wisdom supersedes knowledge, yes, but it has to have a basis in fact. And so many people forget that. Wisdom supersedes knowledge, yet requires knowledge. So here we have, in some way, a blend of the Mercury and Venus vibration. Both are related to wisdom, but let's just say that particularly there is a knowledge factor involved in Mercury. You must remember that the server passes through the hall of learning prior to entering the hall of wisdom. In training the mind-body, he seeks, therefore, orderly acquisition of knowledge, a supply of that which may be lacking, a sequential grasp of the innate mental faculty accumulated in previous lives, and lastly, a steadying of the lower mind, the modification of the versatile psychic nature, or stilling the modifications of the versatile psychic nature, stilling the mind, a steadying of the lower mind so that the higher may dominate and the creative faculty of thought may be projected through stillness. And this is occurring within the soul and within the spiritual triad. So it's a kind of a blend here of the yellow and the indigo. He has to pass through this hall of learning before he can enter the hall of wisdom, which relates, as we know, to the sacrifice petals. They're called the mental petals, but we begin to enter the hall of wisdom with petal number 7, 8, and 9. So in training the mind-body, he seeks this acquisition of knowledge. And to grasp what he knew before, and a steadying of the lower mind, so that it doesn't interfere with the wisdom and the knowledge which has been accumulated from the past. And it's got to be orderly because, think of the hierarchy, the society of organized and illumined minds, as it is called. Orderly and sequential, so that we don't have a chaos in the mind. Now, I wonder, as we are learning, have we learned the orderly acquisition of knowledge, so that the higher may dominate and the creative faculty of thought be projected through stillness. And here we can be talking about the abstract mind, penetrating the usually deflective commotion of the concrete mind. From the silence of the Absolute was projected the universe. That sentence certainly sums up for me some things I've been trying to understand. The Absolute, I've looked at it as the Absolute, as the transcendental deity, eventually, projecting the universe from the entirety of absolute infinity, a choice made with regard to the entirety of absolute infinity. So from this, any universe is ultimately a projection. We don't know how, but ultimately a projection from the absolute. And, well, I'll just put it in red. There's no color involved. From darkness issued light. From the subjective emanated the objective. The negative stillness of the emotional body makes it receptive to impression from above. The positive stillness of the mental body leads to higher inspiration. So these are fundamentals and tell us much about how to handle our equipment. There's a negative stillness of the emotional body, and there's a positive stillness of the mental body. What is the difference? We might say that the mind stands with rapt attention to the possibility of creative downflow, which will alter the quality of the mind considerably. So holding the mind steady in the light is not a negative holding. It is a keenly acute, concentrated holding. and a readiness to adapt what the abstract mind and the intuition feed into the usual mental process. Okay, now, having sought to control and wisely use his personality in its three departments, the lover of humanity seeks perfection in action. Now, notice here he's not calling the one who controls, the one who wisely uses the instrument. He's not calling him the server. He's switching gears and calling this individual by yet another name, which awakens in us a sudden realization that every server is a lover of humanity. Think of it. Let's pause for a moment. What would it take? What would it take to be a true lover of humanity? A lover of humanity. Within our sphere of human beings, the Christ is the great example of the lover of humanity. A simple phrase, but one that requires ever so much work, so many eliminations, so many processes of building in when it comes to knowledge and of transmuting that knowledge into wisdom and accompanying that wisdom with love. Can there be wisdom without love and love without wisdom? I know there can be, an emphasis one way or another, but the two go together. Lover of humanity. Of all human beings as souls, even though personalities may emerge which have a lot to be desired, but somehow one finds a way to be a lover of humanity and of the essential individuals within humanity. No magnificent dreams of martyrdom. We're told that Annie Besant had such dreams. And the glorious yet ephemeral chimeras of spectacular service engross his attention. But the instant application of all his powers to the next duty is the line of his endeavor. Because we can see how, again, the lower egotism could creep in with these dreams of being singled out as some great server of great reputation. No magnificent dreams of martyrdom. Because the eyes would still be, in a sense, on the personal self. and the glorious yet ephemeral chimeras of spectacular service, how it will add to one's reputation. But the instant, that means, automatic, spontaneous, immediate, but the instant application of all his powers to the next duty is the line of his endeavor. He knows that perfection in the foreground of his life and in the details of his environing work will cause accuracy in the background too, and result in a whole picture of rare beauty. These are things we know, and we have to have confidence in them and base our life upon this conviction, this confidence. He knows that perfection in the foreground of his life and in the details of his environing work will contribute to the accuracy in the background too. And so he will be within what he appears at least to be without. Life progresses by small steps, but each step taken at the right time, and each moment wisely occupied leads to long distance covered and a life well spent. Now, all of this is wisdom coming from Master DK, a life well spent. Because inevitably we do spend our energy. And have we purchased what is truly of value, not only to ourselves, but to everybody? Those who guide the human family test out all applicants for service in the small detail of everyday life, and he who shews, old form of the word, he who shews a record of faithful action in the apparently non-essential will be moved into a sphere of greater moment. How in an emergency of crisis can they depend on someone who in everyday matters does slovenly and ill-judged work? So, cautionary tale here. We are tested constantly, and we oftentimes don't realize the test being applied. Faithful, and the old saying, he who is faithful in that which is least is also faithful in that which is much. So, that great second ray that synthesizes all things for us, it is the ray of detailed unity, and although maybe too much attention is paid in some respects to detail, yet attention to detail is part of the picture. And now more. A further method of service shews itself in adaptability. So, this is suggesting, I think, in some ways, the third ray, and why it is that a master can be called an adept. This involves a readiness to retire when others or more important people are sent to fill the niche he may be occupying, or inversely, an ability to step out of office into work of greater importance when some less competent worker can do his work with equal facility and good judgment. So flexibility, third ray. So again, we cannot hold on to our position. Lately, we've had an example of a chief executive in the United States who at all costs sought to hold on to his position, even though a just election had indicated that that could not be rightly done. We get identified with certain trappings of our work in the world, and we wish to hang on to those because they indicate our reputation, our own self-image, about which we can be proud, wrongly proud. We hang on to the non-essential. So, I think Master Decay has demonstrated this, that he was willing to go anywhere and do anything according to the need, a real flexibility. That's the impression I've gotten from reading him and reading about him. It is the part of wisdom to all, in all who serve, neither to rate themselves too highly nor to underrate themselves. Here, the Libran quality of right judgment enters into the picture. Bad work results when the non-efficient fill a post, but it is equally a loss of time and power when skilled workers hold positions where their skill has not full scope, and where the less well-equipped men and women would do just as well. So be ready, therefore, all ye. This is Elizabethan English. All ye who serve. And maybe he gives a reincarnational hint about Master Decay and how and where he learned English. Be ready, therefore, all ye who serve, to stay a lifetime in office non-spectacular and seemingly unimportant, for such may be your destiny, and the place you best may serve, but be equally ready to step on to work of more apparent value. I guess he's hinting that all work is of value when the Master's word goes forth and when circumstances and not the server's planning indicate the time has come. The time is come. Then he asks us to ponder on this last sentence. So we may be trying to, the ambitious people force their way. I've seen, here it is, the year 2021 now. And certain people filled with ambition and an ambition which really almost disqualifies them. Look ahead to what they may become, presidential aspirations, as it were, circle in their minds. But they engineer the opportunities and circumstances, and right judgment certainly do not determine their appropriateness for the level they ambitiously seek. So we either stay or we don't stay, but we let something wiser than our own ambitious nature determine whether we will or will not. And this is kind of a, we might say, a Libran attitude. Interestingly, the plane of spiritual will ruled by Libra, it's not us forcing the issue. It's us being willing, as the will descends, to embrace it and carry it out. We have something humorous called, what is it, Murphy's Law. You continue to rise until you fulfill your level of incompetence. You finally wind up in a post for which you are incompetent. So, let's look at what we're doing in the world and decide, how did we get there? Did we force our way forward with ambitious motive? Or did fate conspire to position us in such a way that the greatest amount of service could be offered? When circumstances, and not the server's planning, indicate the time has come. We're not dealing with the lesser Capricorn mantra, let ambition rule and the doors stand wide. No, it's a different approach. Okay. So what we've had up to this point is a lot of different colors, huh? The methods of service, yes. These three things. The motives for service and the methods of service. So, up to this point, we have considered the right motives for service. Sorry, I'll correct it. And the methods of service, which certainly do involve training all aspects of the personality and the personality itself, and doing that in a way that is right, is sanctioned by hierarchy. And now finally, we have this question of the attitude we should have following our action along these lines. And as you see, we're reaching the end of the book. And what should this attitude be? Oh, watch out when you see that word utter, because it's pretty demanding. Pretty exacting, isn't it? What should this attitude be? Utter dispassion, utter self-forgetfulness, and utter occupation with the next step to be taken. Let's pause. Is that our attitude? Once we have taken these, verified our motive, and adopted the proper method of service, utter dispassion in a way you care, not working without attachment to results, and maintaining our calmness, whatever should be the eventuation, and with joyous confidence moving forward, confidence in the inner God. Utter self-forgetfulness. Well, we tend to the lower self in many, many ways, but it's not really the object of our attention. It is necessary to keep the instrument in proper shape, but we don't remain fixated upon it. What are we thinking about? Maybe we're thinking about the self with a capital S instead of the lower self, the personality. And we throw ourselves into the task to be accomplished completely. All of our resources, spending them totally in the task to be done. The perfect server is he who does to the there's a lot of uts here, aren't there? Utmost of his ability. What he believes to be the master's will, he can maybe never know it entirely. And the work to be done by him in cooperation with the divine plan. So, it's pretty much pedal to the metal, isn't it? We're not holding anything back. Then, having done his part, well, here is the utmost. We'll note that it is an act of will or willingness, an act of willingness. Sometimes I think we would be better if we talked about acts of willingness. Yes, I'm willing to do that. That's closer to the real will. Then, having done his part, he passes on to a continuance of the work and cares not for the result of his action, as as long as he chooses the right way of proceeding and is not fixated on the results. The results will follow if the right method is utilized. Then, having done his part, he passes on to a continuance of the work and cares not for the result of his action. It's difficult to work without attachment to results. I mean, we have to check in on them, of course, and we don't want to continue to be doing the same thing that led to lack of success, expecting that there will be success, but at the same time, it's in the doing that the important approach lies, and not in obsessive preoccupation with the results. We have to concentrate upon the methods. The results will follow. He knows that wiser eyes than his see the end from the beginning, that insight deeper than his, deeper and more loving than his, is weighing up the fruit of his service, and that judgment more profound than his is testing the force and extent of the vibration set up, and is adjusting that force according to the motive. He does not suffer from pride over what he has done, nor from undue depression over lack of accomplishment. So the eyes are upon us as necessary, and we have the sense to leave it in good hands, having done our best, having done all we can do, and then not fixating upon what we have done or have not done. At the very wellspring, at the very spring of the action, our attention is to be focused. And we just have to have that joyous trust that the energies we have generated will be carried on and wisely used with a wisdom and a love that is beyond that which we can presently muster. So no pride, no depression. At all times he does his very best, and wastes not time in backward contemplation, if only, or in the AA program, I understand, could have, would have, should have, but steadily presses forward to the accomplishment of the next duty. An act of will here, and an ability to let go over the fruits. Let the fruits go. They will be wisely distributed by greater beings who can see and can utilize what the disciple has generated. Master Moria has a very strong example of that, in the battle, the disciples are at war with the enemy, but he tears loose aspects of their aura and propels those energies toward the enemy in ways that the disciple could not accomplish. He wastes not time in backward contemplation, but steadily presses forward to the accomplishment of the next duty. Very high expectations are here. I mean, this book is filled with expectations that you wonder, can I ever fulfill all this? But then again, with confidence in the inner God and step by step, we know that what the Master has done, man can do. What man has done, man can do. And so we have the faith that the accomplishment lies ahead. Brooding over past deeds and casting the mind back over old achievement is in the nature of involution, and the servant seeks to work with the law of evolution. We don't go backwards, we don't go left. This is an important thing to note. We do not become tied to the great accomplishment of the past or to the insufficient accomplishment. We press forward. And, there's St. Paul with forgetting the things that lie behind to press forward into the high calling that is in Christ. Paraphrased a little, but that's the idea. Press forward, following the high calling that is in Christ, while we do not allow that which is past to trammel us, to bind us. Easier said than done when, under Scorpio and Pluto, the factor or faculty of memory, and maybe of ancient memory, is awakened. But one has to have detachment from those things, knowing that inner perfection always exists and will be achieved. The wise server after action pays no attention to what his fellow servants say, provided his superiors, either incarnating men and women or the great ones themselves, prove content or silent. He cares not if the result is not that which he anticipated, provided he faithfully did the highest thing he knew. He cares not, divine indifference here, right? He cares not if reproach and reproof assail him, provided his inner self remains calm and non-accusing. That inner self can't accuse. He cares not if he loses friends, relatives, children, the popularity he once enjoyed. All this is in a way like preparation for the great renunciation, and the approbation of his environing associates, the love of being loved, provided his inner sense of contact with those who guide and lead remains unbroken. He cares not if he seem to work in the dark and is conscious of little result from his labors, provided the inner light increases and his conscience has not to say. If the conscience has ought to say, then he cares. And I'm sure we have had those experiences of the accusing conscience. I mean, maybe not morbidly so, but so. That's called sometimes the inner monitor, and it holds us to a certain standard, and then we simply must improve. Reading these final words in the book is such an inspiration, and written by one who has trodden the path of wisdom unto the wisdom of mastership. Yes. He has trodden this way, and all masters have, and those beyond. The particulars maybe belong to the particular individual involved, but the generalities will be encountered. These types of loss will occur. Certain types of loss will occur. And as it is said, all will drop from our hands, and we will hold on to nothing, knowing that everything is an effect of the one cause, the one identity which we are, all of us the same. To sum it all up, 350 pages worth, the motive may be epitomized in these few words: the sacrifice of the personal self for the good of the oneself. So that's the motive. The sacrifice of the personal self for the good of the oneself, which of course we are. We're sacrificing that which we seem to be but are not for the good of that which we and all are. The method may also be shortly put. Now, that's what a really good teacher is doing here. He's summarizing all this in succinct ways so they can be uh, easily assimilated. Wise control of the personality and discrimination in work and time. He's given many details about how this can be done. Wise control of the personality and discrimination in work and time, according to, we might say, the law of economy must be observed. And the resultant attitude will be the resultant attitude. Complete dispassion and a growing love of the unseen and the real. Well, you could spend a year or however long you wanted to spend just in the summary of this great little book. Well, not so little. So he begins with motive, method, and result. Sums it all up in ways that it would be hard to evade, would it not? So much depends upon our willingness to carry out these few simple, apparently, directives. And it's like a work of music here. It's been developed like a work of music. Occult meditation at the beginning, occult meditation at the end. This is his resounding chord. All this will be consummated. Will be. Not just can be. Through steady application to occult meditation. So my appreciation of what is given here is just growing over the years and decades. For a little book, it's astonishingly complete in its foundational qualities. Of course, there are many generalities, naturally, and we don't have all the details, but we don't need them. We have enough to keep us on that straight and narrow path which will lead to true accomplishment in the field of spirituality, in the field of approach to the ashram, in the field of approach to the hierarchy. And it would just be my hope that we can find it within ourselves to carry out even a small proportion of what is so wisely and clearly suggested. So much time will be saved, so many errant paths need not be pursued. So much more ready availability for service at a time of humanity's dire need. So, what I will do here, this is 63, we've had 63 programs. There will be more because, I'm pretty well determined to, even though I've done the written commentary on the new esoteric schools, there's something that happens in the conversational approach that may be of value to everyone, and certainly this kind of thing can be listened to while one is doing, one's mundane duties and housework and exercise and things of that nature. So I'll get back to it as best I can, as soon as I can. And the application remains for us, and the rereading and the re-listening and the solidification of the indications that Master DK has given. That remains for us, and no one of us is going to be perfect in fulfillment. We're just not going to be. And certain parts of the books will stand out more prominently for one than for another, and we do what we can. And we will improve. We will be confirmed as members of the new group of world servers. We will help the hierarchy. We will help the divine plan manifest on earth. Okay, friends, then from the Moria Federation and the University of the Seven Rays and Tuya and myself and all the many helpers on the communications, in the communications group, and all the faculty members, we're wishing you lots of love and many blessings. And, for all of us, the will to go forward persistently, no matter what apparently happens, we persist. Okay. We'll be back with some work on the new esoteric schools.